something. And there was a time when we were both single men and we would go out and have a drink or two. There was one night we went out to a place that is no longer there because now TCU owns the land and they put something else up there. But Victor told these group of guys that I was the famous basketball player, Gene Smith. And they were just overwhelmed because they didn't know who Gene Smith was. Well, first of all, he wasn't a famous basketball player, but Vic had them convinced by the end of the evening that I was a famous basketball player. And that's because he and I played a lot of basketball together. Vic was always a go-getter playing basketball. He had hands of rock. And I would throw him passes and he would hardly ever catch them. But he always played the game to the best of his ability, and he was always a good teammate. Well, I ended up getting married, but then later he met a lovely lady who was actually teaching at TCU at the time. And they began dating. Her name is Kara. 10 years ago, they wedded. And she now no longer teaches at TCU. She's actually in the communications department at the University of Dallas in Irving. But the two of them have three beautiful kids. And these kids, as you've heard Victor say, are certainly a handful. It's Everett, Liam, and Alec. And they keep Victor hopping on his toes all the time. Well, without any further ado, tonight Victor is going to share with us the history of Hope Farm, which is a worthwhile organization here in Fort Worth, but also beginning to spread to other parts of Texas. Victor, we have made you a co-host so you can share the screen and share your PowerPoint. Without any further ado, Victor Neal.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Gene. But I feel I do need to correct you on one. You did say I was getting you into trouble. I think it was we were getting each other into trouble. So I'm not gonna lie, we had a lot of fun back in those days, but I'm kind of glad they're over. So what I want to do tonight, first of all, is thank y'all. It was obvious that by the hook or the crook that this was going to be a virtual meeting, whether it was because of the pandemic or because of this mess we're in. So I'm glad to be joining y'all. Like I said, I'd much rather be in person. I look forward to doing that one day in the future. And I'm impressed. I'm surprised that this many people were able to attend, because just because you got power and water doesn't mean that this is something that you can do. So I'm pleased to be here. I thank you for having me. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of history of Hope Farm. And I don't know how many of you are already familiar with Hope Farm. Like Gene said, I worked at TCU for a long time. And if you've seen Hope Farm driving up and down I-35, it's right off the access road. We've got a 2-story building that's actually a gym on the bottom floor. So it's a huge building. So it's hard to miss. And for a long time, that building's been there since around 2012. So I remember when it was built, but I had no idea what Hope Farm did until I started working there. And unfortunately, as the marketing guy, I run into a lot of people in this town who have no idea that Hope Farm is there or what we do. And as far as history goes, I'll tell you, Hope Farm is it was incorporated in 1990. So we're a mature organization. It's not like we're the new kid on the block. So my job for the past 3.5 years, can you guys hear me? Good. So my job, I was really actually hired to be the fundraiser, because while at TCU, I made a lot of connections. I know a lot of people, but my background is in advertising, PR, marketing. So as the marketing guy, I want to make sure that that's one of the things I do, is put Hope Farm on the map for an organization that's as old as we are. So I've got a little slideshow I'm going to share with you. And then I'll come back from the slideshow and I'll probably go straight into a short video that I have that does, because the thing that got me at Hope Farm, I never thought, first of all, I was going to be in fundraising. I never thought I'd work at Hope Farm. But a guy named Brian Estridge introduced me to Gary Randall, who was one of the co-founders of Hope Farm. And when I was considering my decision, Gary said, hey, why don't we do this? And we met at Paris Coffee Shop. So you talk about history in Fort Worth. Gary said, why don't you come to Hope Farm and meet some of these young men? We take boys age 5 all the way through 18. And I said, okay, I can do that. right down the street. Like I told you, I live right here by Arlington Heights. So Hope Farm is like an 8-minute drive from me. And it's about the same 8-minute drive from TCU. So when I went there, and this is the trick I use now as the fundraising guy, when you meet these boys, like I said, especially the younger kids, you'd have to have a really hard heart to look at Hope Farm and say, hey, that's not a place for me, or I can't help, no matter what it is. So that's how Gary Randall hooked me. So let me launch this, let me show this little slideshow and tell you more about the history of Hope Farm. Can you guys see that slideshow?
Yes.
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 Okay. This was actually, and you guys, I don't know if anyone stays up late for ABC's Dateline. At the time this picture was taken, I was not Dateline, but Nightline. That's Byron Pitts. Byron was a guest speaker, actually the keynote speaker at a fundraiser we had at Hope Farm when I first started. Great, it was nice to meet him. Just a great all-around guy. So let me, so Hope Farm, we're a leadership program for boys who don't have fathers. So I think what separates us from a lot of other nonprofits is the fact that we deal specifically with males. The two gentlemen you see on the screen, Gary Randall at the top, was a Fort Worth cop. Noble Crawford at the bottom was actually with the DPS. He was an investigator for the Department of Public Safety. Gary played basketball at TCU, so you can't tell in that picture, but Gary was 6'10". So Gary got a lot of attention everywhere he went. And I think it really came in handy with the young men at Hope Farm, especially the younger ones, because when you're trying to discipline kids and a 6'10" guy comes in, he really gets their attention. Gary retired for health reasons about 2 years ago. Excuse me. But he and Noble actually recruited me. These are the two co-founders. And Noble just retired in October. So you look at the senior leadership, the guys that started this back in probably the late 80s, actually. And they're now both gone. So the scary fact is, as far as executive leadership goes at Hope Farm, I've got the longest tenure there with about 3.5 years. So let's talk about some statistics and historic and why fatherlessness is such a big deal to us. If you look at fatherlessness, 63% of youth suicides are from people who don't have fathers. 90% of homeless and runaway children, 85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders, and 80% of rapists that are motivated with displaced anger all came from fatherless homes. So I think it's important to why we, that is why we support fatherless boys. And I'll tell you the story. What got Gary and Noble to start Hope Farm, Gary as a cop went out to a prison visit back in the late 80s. And when he started talking to the warden, he found that one of the underlying themes was that a lot of the young men that were incarcerated came from fatherless homes. So he started thinking, what can I do about this? He went to church and just happened to meet Noble Crawford, and they got to talking, and Noble had similar concerns because he felt, as a law enforcement officer, a lot of the penal system, a lot of what was being done was not really solving the problem. In a lot of cases, it was making it worse. So what Gary and Noble thought is, hey, the guys that are in jail right now, we can't prevent that. But what we can do is stop them from going to jail. And from that, Hope Farm was started. So we're a mentoring program. Like I said, obviously, fatherless boys, most of the parents that we deal with are going to be moms. We see a lot of aunts. We see a lot of grandmothers. But typically, there's going to be that parental figure is going to be a female. Now, the Morningside neighborhood. So if you're familiar with Hope Farm, if you've driven up and down I-35, you've probably seen us over there on the east side. And I don't know much about history of Fort Worth, but I'd love to talk to someone who could fill me in. It's obvious when you drive up and down the street, Evans Avenue is what borders us on the east. We've got Ramsey Avenue on the south, and then to the north, you've got Jessamine, and then to the west is I-35. But you can tell by driving up and down that street that used to be a pretty happening area of town. My understanding is back in the 1930s and 1940s, that wasn't just big for the Black community, but Evans Avenue was pretty big for Fort Worth. There's a courtyard right at Rosedale and Evans, a lot of historic big churches. You can see homes that are obviously at one time were really expensive, fancy homes. A lot of them are in disrepair now. So you look at this neighborhood, and when I did a little bit of research, I mean, you had guys like Jackie Wilson and Charlie Pride were coming to this neighborhood to perform. So some big name acts. But now you look at the Morningside neighborhood where Hope Farm is, and you'll see some stats that tell you why it's so important for us to be there. So the life expectancy in that 76104 zip code is about 67 years, which is the lowest in Texas. And it's also about 12 years below the national average, which is pretty shocking. You've got about 84% of the households in our zip code are single parent, as opposed to only 33% for the entire Tarrant County. Crime rate's high, 21% higher than national average. And the per capita income you can see is about $18,000. That figure is probably a couple years old, but I promise you it hasn't really gone up. So if you've ever seen this gym, that's our Morningside campus. That's where it all started. We talked about this being in a historic neighborhood that's now in disrepair. We opened a Como campus. So about 3.5 years ago, when I started working at Hope Farm, we had a Como campus, but it was really a house we were renting. Capacity was about 15 boys, and we were at capacity. So we had just raised enough money to build a brand new facility. And what you see in this picture is our Como campus, which I like to use the landmark, the Eskimo hut, but for other people, the old original railhead is right across from where our location is. So right off of Vickery, again in Como, a neighborhood that used to be popping, but now is in a lot of disrepair. So that's the building you see there. There's an academy, it's called River Tree Academy, that's also in Como, and they cater to lower income kids. So we're an after school program. So Riverhead Academy actually, River Tree Academy, actually during the day rent space from Hope Farm. So they've got their 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students at Hope Farm during the day. And just before COVID hit, so about a year ago, we opened a campus in South Dallas. It's over off of MLK and I-45, real close to Fair Park. Again, if you're familiar with Dallas, a rough neighborhood. Cornerstone Baptist Church is our partner there. So we rent, they have actually a row of older homes that have been renovated really nicely. And we rent one of those homes for our South Dallas campus. And we're thinking about maybe opening one up in Waco, but we'll see how that goes. So leadership development is a big thing for Hope Farm. So the gentleman you see on the right-hand side, his name is Felix Stiggers. And Felix is currently our program director. Felix actually started at Hope Farm when he was 5 years old. So he knows the program. And when you're dealing with these kids, they look at a guy like me, like Gene told you, I'm a military brat. So I grew up, went to a private university. So these kids, I can't really relate to how they grew up, but Felix can, because, 25 years ago, Felix was them. So it's great to have him back on campus because he can relate to them like none of us can. Bible study is also big, what we do at Hope Farm. So I wouldn't call us a religious organization. Jeremiah 29:11 is a scripture that you'll see all around campus. We use the Bible to impart life lessons. So we get a lot of questions about, what if a kid's not religious? What if he's Muslim? What if he's atheist, agnostic? It doesn't matter. I mean, we don't force you to be religious, but we feel that there are a lot of great examples of how you should behave yourself and leadership qualities that you can learn from the Bible. And character building, that's a big thing for us. This young man right here, his name is Kevon Renfro, graduated about 1.5 years ago and is now in the United States Navy. This young man right here just graduated last summer and got a scholarship to TCU. So he is actually in talk about a messed up freshman year. So Shamar is in his 2nd semester at TCU, but he's been all virtual. The lady that you see right there is his grandmother. Shamar lost both his parents at a very young age. His father was murdered in the streets of Fort Worth, and his mom, shortly after, had an unexpected death, a sudden death. So his grandmother has been raising him. She's 89 years old. She's in poor health. So you can imagine the challenges that are associated with what Shamar is going through right now. He's got all this weight on his shoulders, and he's trying to go to school. He's trying to go to TCU on a scholarship, and it's been really rough for him. But what we've been able to do is stand in for Shamar. So when he does his virtual classroom, he comes to campus. He has an office. Mr. Crawford, one of the founders who just retired, we haven't filled that position. So Shamar actually uses his office, and he has all of us there to help him with whatever he needs school-wise. So, and he's just a great kid. The Fast Forward Reading Program is something that we're really proud of. We implemented that about 2 years ago. So you talk about historically, and you talk about, we like to talk about generational change. So if you look at reading statistics, you've got about 2/3 of kids who aren't reading to grade level by the end of 3rd grade are going to end up in jail, on welfare, or in prison, or all three. So one of the things that we've started doing in the last 2 years is implementing this Fast Forward Reading Program, because we take kids as early as 5 years old. And when we implemented the program, 100% of our kids were at a reading deficit. And I've got some latest stats here. We have some kids who have been in the program for 8 months and who've shown a 5-year increase in their reading, in their grade level of reading, which tells you not only is the program effective, but the program was really, really needed. It's about a $40,000 a year program. It's software. It's like a video game. So you can see here, that's Mr. Gray. He runs our Como campus. But it's like a video game. So these kids really get into it. And the big thing when it comes to funding is that we now have statistics that we can use to show the effectiveness of what we're doing. When I got to Hope Farm, I think a lot of times we were using just anecdotal evidence and pictures of cute kids. But when you're trying to get a $500,000 grant, that's not enough. So being able to take this and show the statistics, like I said, this is generational, potentially generational changing. Because if these kids aren't reading it in the 3rd grade, they're not going to do too well. So we can show what progress we're making and the success that we're having with kids like Shamar that I showed you earlier, and Felix, that just helps what we do. Our Mother's Resource Program, obviously dealing with the one parent, it's going to be the mom. So our Mother's Resource Program offers financial management courses, nutritional courses, and the mothers, it's a way for them to remain involved, because if they're not buying into what we're doing and reinforcing it at home, then it makes our battle all that much tougher. The young man on the left is a guy named Thurman Hogan, a kid from Como. He started at Hope Farm at the age of 5, went through. Now he's at Trinity University. He's in his senior year at Trinity University in San Antonio, which is where my mom and sister happen to be. So I've kind of put them on the case to make sure that Thurman doesn't get out of hand. And they've done a really good job. So I've seen pictures. Thurman, obviously pre-COVID, has sent me pictures of him eating my mom's fried chicken. And I'm like, she hasn't made that for me in 20 years. What? Why is Thurman getting that? But I think it's just a great opportunity for us to provide some more family structure around these young men. But this guy is, and I wish, again, if this were in person and he were in town, I would drag him to this meeting, because he's just an exceptional young man and just the model of what we want to be at Hope Farm. Vocational. So Mayor Price was at a ceremony back in October or November, when we kicked off what's known as this Salone Vocational Center. So Tom Salone was one of the original board members of Hope Farm. He passed away unexpectedly about 2 years ago and left money for us to start a vocational center. So we broke ground on that, like I said, late last year. We were probably a third of the way to raising the funds that we need. And this is just a rendering of what it might be. We're going to make a container building for our vocational center. I don't know that it's going to look this neat, but if you've ever been down Evans and Rosedale, there's an office building there that's made out of these used containers. And the guy that built those is helping us come up with the concept for this. So vocational training, as you know, college ain't for everyone, especially the kids that we deal with, because some of them really need to get out and start making money and earning and getting jobs to help their families. So having this vocational center, we've partnered up with Tarrant County College, is going to be a great alternative for the kids who can't go to college. And then this last slide is calling it Where Are They Now? Just an example of what some of our young men are doing. And most of these guys I've met, Arthur Breland is going to be the featured speaker for our next fundraiser, which, like this, will be virtual. It'll be in April, but he's the pastor of Woodland Hills Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's another one of those guys that started at the age of 5 and went all the way through. Now he's probably, I want to say he's in his early to maybe mid 30s. Detrick Dukes in the Air Force, Demetrion Amy, who walked on at Stephen F. Austin to play football, played at TCU for a while, transferred and earned a scholarship. A young man named Darian Hadley, who just graduated. The other one I want to point out, we talked about Tavon Renfro already, but Cameron Prater, he just got hired as an assistant strength coach at the University of Virginia. And I mean, these guys that are, and think about it, taking kids at the age of 5 and being an organization that's 30 years old, we're just now starting to see really what the fruits of our labor are. I mean, we've got these young men who are graduating and going on to have their own success, to be fathers, to be family men, and to have these stories as alums that we can now use to sell the program. So I think as far as timing wise, it's just a really exciting time for Hope Farm and definitely for me to be there. I think I've got a video now. I think I'll go into the video and then we can take questions. Gene, does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Find it real quick.
Now, you're a technology guy. I thought you'd have this well under control.
You know how technology is. It's different every time you need to use it. Oh, give me 1 minute.
Our technology guy is figuring the technology out.
Hold on 1 second. The problem with the technology guy is he didn't queue it up. So let me queue it up real quick.
I could banter with you a little more to maybe I'd get you on the ball.
So I think I got it now. So let me get back in Zoom. Now it's frozen. Hold on. Can you see my screen at all?
I just see you the gallery view.
Okay. Yeah, that's gone away from me for some reason. All I see is you. Okay, there we go. Let's share this. And I got to share the audio too, do I not? Share sound. Can you guys see my screen now? With the video?
Yep, okay.
Yeah, you want to make the screen bigger.
Yes.
There was something more that needed to be done.
Can you hear it?
It's good now.
Living short lives because of the criminal activity they may be involved in.
I was an angry child. I wasn't aware why my father left. I wasn't aware why he made promises that he never kept. I grew up in a household with my mother, my aunt, my little cousin, and my older sister for a while. It wasn't uncommon for us to hear like gunshots outside. It wasn't uncommon for us to see crackheads down the street, to see homeless people just sleeping on the street, to see drug fiends just coming up to you constantly asking you for money, to see my friends who had parents who were strung out on drugs just walking around. I actually thought that was normal. But I never even had the chance to digest the fact that I was a statistic in that way. Because I was a part of Hope Farm, I was always told that I'm a leader. I was always told that I could overcome anything. And I was always told that I was a game changer. And that's not how the world feels about young men or young boys, young Black boys from the south side of Fort Worth who doesn't have a father in the home. They just expect by the third grade for them to end up in a jail cell or end up dead.
The love. Where's the love? Wow.
My name is Noble Crawford. I am one of the co-founders of Hope Farm along with Gary Randall. My current title is Chief Operating Officer, but having been here as long as I have, titles don't always mean as much as they sound like, but that's my role at this time. Hope Farm was born out of that experience as a law enforcement officer. I was a criminal investigator for the Texas Department of Public Safety. When I arrested somebody and taken them to the county jail, part of that population were young African American and Hispanic boys living short lives because of the criminal activity they may be involved in getting into the system and not getting out of it, or being marked for the rest of their lives because they committed some kind of crime or they were convicted whether they did it or not. There was something more that needed to be done to help these guys. And law enforcement was not the solution, because arresting them and putting them in jail did not solve the problem. It only aggravated the problem. And so the burden that I had, I discovered that Gary had the same burden. And so we decided that we need to do something about it. What we discovered is how hungry and how thirsty those boys were for a relationship with a father. Let's just say there were 10 boys in the classroom. If I spent a third of my time with at least one of those boys, another boy would come and ask that kid, "Is that your daddy?" Because just that very little bit of time of attention and focus is not what they were used to.
Mr. Randall, Mr. Crawford, I have a young man here who is in dire straits. His family doesn't have anywhere to sleep tonight. He is extremely angry. He has been getting suspended and he just needs help. What can you all do for us? And their response was always, let's get a meeting set up with the mother. Let's come to the school and let's start building those relationships. I wish that every principal had someone in their community that they could rely on so that when I call, you're there.
I knew that we were making a difference as early as those days when we were at the elementary school. And that multiplied once we started our own place, because we started teaching them very basic social skills like handshakes and looking you in the eye and greeting you and giving you their name. And so I knew with that very small thing that we were teaching them that we were making a difference.
Mentorship is definitely a big part of our program. It's so much easier to prepare a kid than to repair. And so if we can bring them in as kindergartner and mold them into the Hope Farm way and set the disciplines right, then they become prime candidates to be mentored for younger kids as they come through. And so that being disciples making disciples makes our model very special.
My son had a lot of anger issues, and he was dealing with not having a father around, and they sent him to therapy. They mentored him. They took time out with him, and they showed him that no matter what, that he was always loved.
Hope Farm provides that thick chain that anchors every single kid deep in their soul. That was the most magical experience for me to witness. It makes them better students. It makes them better people. That impact extends to what they do at home and then inevitably into the community.
So by the time Charles got home, he was so excited. He came in and said, "Mama, you know what? Did you know I could be an entrepreneur?" With Hope Farm in his corner, I'm pretty sure he can achieve all of his goals, all of his dreams. As a mother, it makes me feel great.
Gang activity in this community is very real. It was just about 6 months ago, we've had a conversation with one of the counselors at one of the schools nearby. And they reached out to us and said they're in crisis mode. The gang members are lining up after school and recruiting third and fourth graders into their gangs. And the young men at this stage in their life, they're just looking for a family. And so if we don't get them, the gang members will. But we want to offer them a better family. And so that's why we do what we do and go to the lengths that we do in order to bring boys into our safe environment and turn them into Christ-centered young men.
In my community, I was surrounded by Crips. I wasn't introduced to gang-related activities until about middle school. And Hope Farm had already had the chance to pour life into me, and I was blessed enough to be sheltered from a lot of different things. It was impossible to shelter me from everything. I actually had an encounter when I was walking home with another gentleman from Hope Farm, one of my Hope Farm brothers, and we got confronted by a guy who was in a gang. I don't know what his reason was, what provoked him, what motivated him, but he ended up striking me. He punched me in my face. Then he pulled a gun out. He pulled a gun out on us, and it shook me, And I think that was the first real time that I was fully exposed to my atmosphere and what life really was like. Growing up on the south side of Fort Worth, I was petrified. I didn't know what to do. I was reminded of a verse in Jeremiah 29:11. It's the theme verse of Hope Farm. My heart kind of breaks because here's a kid who is pretty much a black kid just like me, angry just like me, same age as me. And the only difference, the only variable is that I'm a part of this organization and he's not. What's crazy is that could have been me. You know, that could have been me, that kid that walked up on somebody pulling out a gun because I let my anger control me. That could have easily been me. And it's kind of hard to think about that. Yeah, it is hard to think about it because it does hurt. It's hard to think about that another kid who to some people may just seem like some thug or some gangster or some delinquent ready to just wash their hands with him, but he really was just crying out for attention. You know, he really just wanted to be loved. He needed to be loved. I don't even know where that guy is. You know, I don't know if he's in jail. I don't know if he's dead. I don't know if he turned his life around, but what would his life have been like if he was a part of Hope Farm? You know, what if he had the opportunity to have men to care enough about him to pour into his life and speak life into him and let him know that he's loved and let him know what thus says the Lord and let him know that he can be more than his environment, but he didn't have a chance. That's why Hope Farm is so important. I want to make sure that I can do everything that I can to make sure that these guys that are in my care don't have to go down that same route. So when I see that 5-year-old Felix coming through the gate for the first time, I immediately just want to embrace him. You know, I immediately just want him to know that he is loved, that I see him, and that everything is going to be okay.
A couple years ago, Hope Farm celebrated their 20th year anniversary. As we move forward to our next 20 years, I invite you to spend some time on one of our campuses. I'm willing to bet if you spend some time with our boys, you'll be compelled to do more.
So that video was produced about a year ago. So everyone that you see in that video is a little bit older, but it's still very current. And I love showing that video, especially now in COVID times, because you get to see the faces of these young men, and especially the young ones. You know, I've mentioned several times, and Jean mentioned it, I've got 3 kids of my own. They happen to be boys. So understanding what it's like and the role I play in their lives, it's really a lot more rewarding than it would have been if I was at Hope Farm back when me and Jean were running the streets. It's just really, it's been really impactful these last 3 years. So I'd love to take any questions. I see Hollis has one. So we're an after school program. So from some of those overhead shots, you can see we've got a big campus, and a lot of the cars, we own our own vehicles. So we're like a 5 to 8 mile radius. We actually pick the boys up after school and bring them to campus. Because as you can imagine, a lot of the moms don't have the flexibility to take off work and go get a kid, or they don't have a nanny. So we're not primarily, we are an after school program. A lot of people ask if we're residential, but we're not. So on the weekends, they're on their own. So think about the time that we have them from about 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, 4 hours a day if we're lucky, probably closer to 3. At 5:30, we provide dinner for all of them because we don't know if they're going to get a meal for dinner. And that's an opportunity for us to impart social skills, etiquette, manners, things like that. But it's a great opportunity for us to make sure they get fed. But then after that, they're on their own. So only having them for 3 hours a day, and then they're out there, and I'll call it in the wilderness, because that's what it's like at some of these schools. And for some of the moms, we've got some great moms, but we've also got some moms who will show up and the car just reeks of marijuana. So we've got some moms who don't really care, and they see us kind of like cheap, like a cheap childcare, which is fine by us, because at least we're having a chance to impact the lives of these young boys. Jen, I think you're muted if you asked.
Are there other questions? Well, I have one, Vic. I'm curious. I know that you guys have opened up the Como facility. You mentioned you have the place in Dallas now. You're looking toward Waco. Are there plans to continue expanding throughout Texas?
Well, what I'll tell you about the expansion. So when I started, we had one campus. Como was put on hold as we built our new building. So this expansion has been it's been pretty fast. So I don't want to say we're shutting anything down, Gene, but I think we're going to kind of slow down a bit. And in the case of the Waco campus, that's not something that the board and the executive team came up with. That we were approached by a church down in Waco. And just like we partnered with a church in Dallas, that seems to be a good way, because now we have roots in the neighborhood, especially when you look at outside of Fort Worth. So right now, I think Waco, if we do expand to Waco, that might be it for a while.
Okay. We have a couple other questions.
Yeah. So Melinda, is there a tutoring program as part of, so the tutoring, it's not necessarily a tutoring program, but when the boys come in, we partner with their schools and they have a folder. We look in that folder and it tells us what they have for homework, what they need to work on. It also tells us citizenship, because that's a big part of what we do. So if these kids have been acting up in school, then there's some consequences to face at Hope Farm. So there's not, I'd say, a formal tutoring program. Basically, when they come in, they sign in, and then they're going to go either to Bible study, they're going to go to their reading program, they're going to start setting up for dinner, or they're going to go into some one-on-one sessions, depending on what the need is and who we have. We have a lot of, again, pre-COVID, we've had a lot of volunteers who can come in and sit with the boys one-on-one and either tutor them in a specific subject or just talk to them. I think one thing that's been really successful for us is having young men, and we get a lot of TCU kids. Like I said, Mr. Randall played hoops at TCU. The partnership between Hope Farm and TCU was strong and continues to be strong. I've still got some really good friends at TCU. So we do have some tutors who come in, or mentors that are one-on-one. And what makes that so effective is that the boys will see us as father figures, and sometimes they don't disclose everything to us, but when they see other young men come in who don't have to be there, they a lot of times open up to them. So there's not necessarily a one-on-one tutoring, but there is part of that. How do boys apply? So their teachers can refer them. Hope Farm's not for everyone. You know, I've had a big part of what I do, like I said, I get people on campus and give tours. And I've had people ask me, well, how bad do the kids have to be to get into Hope Farm? And that's not what we're looking for. So we're looking for kids who want to succeed and are being held back. So when the boys apply, or when their mothers apply, there's actually an interview process. So they do have to come in and they do have to meet with the executive team and see if they're fit. Because like I said, if we have boys who are getting a lot of trouble, then that's going to be a distraction to the other kids in the program. And that's maybe not going to be the best fit for Hope Farm. But yeah, we get referrals from churches, from schools. Schools are a big one, getting relationships with the counselors and with the teachers of these schools. And I would say, yeah, it is like big brothers and big sisters, with the exception that it's just males. And I get a lot of questions about, well, why don't you guys have females? And I can't answer that. I mean, Mr. Randall and Mr. Crawford felt strongly when they went to this prison that they wanted to focus on boys strictly. And that's what we've been doing for 30 years, and that's what we're good at. I would guess that when you introduce females, that there's a whole other dynamic that might really throw things out of sync, especially when you go from age 5 through 18. So we've stayed away, and we had I forgot the name of the program, but they had money and they wanted to start a Hope Farm in Arlington, but one of the conditions was it had to include females. And that's just not what we do. And we kind of felt like with Mr. Crawford and Mr. Randall just recently retiring, it would kind of be a little disrespectful to be like, hey, we're changing Hope Farm and now we accept females. Although there's obviously a great need for that too. You say, well, other comparable programs are like this locally. I would argue there aren't any others that focus primarily on the men, or none that I know of. And as far as Promise Keepers, I don't know much about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if there have been other attempts at this. And Gary Randall, if any of you know him, Gary knew a lot of people. Gary was so charismatic. He did a really good job of getting a lot of support here in the community. So what he has set up, we definitely want to continue to build it and keep the foundation that he built. We want to keep that the way he intended it to. And Carol, you have a great question about older participants mentoring the young ones. I've been at Hope Farm long enough to see that. You see the boys who are 5 to 8 who are really cute. Then you see the kids who are kind of buttholes because they're a little older, they're know-it-alls, typical guys. I imagine Gene was much like this when he was in junior high school. And then you see the older kids. And if you see and we love to get Hope Farm boys as young as possible because they're a lot easier to mold at 5 than they are at 10, 12. So every year for spring break, we have a basketball clinic. And a lot of the volunteers for the basketball clinic it's for grades, it's for 5th grade, it's for kindergarten through 8th grade. So it's not for all of our boys. So what happens is a lot of our boys who are 9th grade and up, they volunteer and they really set the standard that we've set with them. So yeah, they do mentor the young ones because they know what our rules are. And what's interesting is our basketball clinic is open to all kids in that age group, not just Hope Farm boys. So to see our boys come back, and we don't have to tell them anything. They just know what's expected and they keep these kids in line. Obviously, this is gonna be the first year. That was the last major event we had before COVID because it's during spring break. So it was last year. We're not gonna have it this year. But we've had about 110 boys come through our basketball clinic since I've been there every year, which is great. If you imagine a gym, that's about as many kids as a gym can handle. But yeah, having those older boys come back has been awesome. Good question about the food desert, because that's exactly where we're at. So a lot of people think that Hope Farm, and I understand why, as the marketing guy, the logo we have, it's about a farm. It's a guy sowing seeds. I got a call from a trucking company asking, how do you get your produce to market? Because they really thought we were like an organic farm. And that's what we look like. So we have a garden area. We used to have a master gardener that just recently moved away. So every now and then we plant things. We had tomatoes, we had potatoes out there. But it hasn't been something that's taken off. There's a place in Dallas called Bonton Farms that you may be familiar with. And I think Bonton Farms, and I've had very limited discussions with them and what they do, and to see if that's a concept that we can start to incorporate into what we do. But given that three-hour window that we have, where we're pretty packed up with Bible study, dinner, and the reading program. These are great questions.
Are there other questions? Oh, Terry.
It's Susie, and I do
Susie,
have
yeah.
one. And Victor, I'm just amazed at what you all do. I think it's great, but I'm just curious because it seems like I saw a slide that said Hope Farm, and the Hope had a period after each letter. So I'm just curious, is Hope in the Hope Farm truly the word hope in what you're doing, or does it stand for something?
It's both. So obviously the traditional definition of hope is easy and that resonates with people. The concept of a farm, I get, it's sometimes misplaced, but it actually stands for helping other people excel. And that's why
Oh,
you
there we go.
sometimes, yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
why you see the periods there.
Okay.
Good eye.
Thank you.
Most people don't catch that. I've never had that question.
Helping other people.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, other questions? Other questions? Well, Victor, thank you so much for sharing your experience with Hope Farm, and hopefully from this group here, you will have newfound supporters. I think the work you guys do is absolutely remarkable. It really is. I have a young, well, not so young son. My son is in the butthole stage. And I'm trying to get him under control, and I'm not having much success. Maybe I need to put him over there just to let you guys get him under control. But in any case, if there are no further questions, I would like to go ahead and close the meeting by reminding you that our next meeting is April 29th. And it's going to be Kate Holliday, and she's going to be offering a talk about the ugliest building in town, Fort Worth, and the design and technology of telephone buildings. So I don't know. There's a lot of ugly buildings.
Let me just say that if you think that sounds boring, I have heard her talk, and it is fascinating. It is utterly fascinating.
Well, that's fantastic. And
So,
what I hope we're able to do is, you know, hopefully Carol or someone will create a Zoom, a survey where we can find out how many people have been vaccinated for COVID, and perhaps we can have a in-person and virtual event coinciding. That's my hope for the future. Hopefully by the end of April, we should be at that point where we can perhaps share that experience together. And in the future, you know, if anyone has questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. My email is just g.smith@tcu.edu, and we're trying to grow this organization, make this organization more socially responsible, to make this organization representative of what Fort Worth truly is. So without any further ado, thank you so much for being here tonight.
I do want to, before you close us out though, I do want to encourage you to find us on Facebook or go to our website, hopefarmfw.org, and sign up for our email blast. And then, like Gene said, at some point when people are vaccinated and we're on the other end of this, I'd love to have all or any or whatever, whoever would like to come out to Hope Farm. I'd love to have you. And the last question I got was from Judy Alter. And I did want to say hi because Judy, I haven't seen you in ages. So I'm glad you were able to join us here. I do see you on Facebook, but that doesn't count. But thank y'all for having me.
And Victor, if you notice that Brenda Matthews, who is a professor at Texas Wesleyan, says get in touch with her.
I saw that.
Okay.
I take a screenshot of that, and I will do that, Brenda. Thank you, because y'all are right up the street.
So is there any last comments before we conclude this evening? I'm trying to look at everybody's little screen to see if anybody has anything to say.
Gene, this was a great program. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank Victor. I mean, I didn't do anything. I just sat up here and talked a little bit. But thank you so much for being here tonight. And please share the information you learned so that it'll benefit us all. So good evening.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Gene.
Bye-bye.
Good seeing you, buddy.
Yep. Good to see you, bud. Thanks, Mary.